Self-actualization, self-transcendence, enlightenment, spiritual awakening, nirvana, a higher consciousness. If you're looking for a serious and accurate explanation of what's going on, you've come to the right place. I know what I'm talking about. But there's a lot of confusion out there, and this has to be corrected if there's to be any kind of meaningful framework for discussion or implementation. The objective of this film is to provide you with a trustworthy summary or overview of this highest aim of all. What do terms like self-transcendence or enlightenment actually mean? What's the aim? What's been missing? And what's gone wrong? It could already have been different if the purity had been respected. Instead, surprise, surprise, it was tarnished, dumbed down, exploited for personal gain. We despair at the ignorance and bullshit surrounding this absolutely important subject. It shouldn't be this way, polluted with half-truths, irrelevancies and utter nonsense. We humans can be smart, intelligent, but often we're not. We could pick a much earlier starting point, but the flower power era of the late 1960s and early 70s is definitely relevant. There was a glimmer of a chance, with many wondering if this was the beginning of a new dawn for humanity. Initially emerging from opposition to the Vietnam War, it grew into a counterculture movement, an attempt to break out of the usual supposed-to-be life, going against the dictates of the establishment. There was a lot of psychedelic drugs around, and the emergence of a more vibrant type of music played its part. Plus, there was greater sexual expression made possible by the birth control pill. The rallying cry was love, peace and understanding. There was a surge of interest in Eastern religions and philosophies, especially Buddhism and Hinduism, as East met West. Aldous Huxley had written 4 classics which were widely read. There was Brave New World and Island, of course. The Doors of Perception elaborated on his psychedelic experience under the influence of mescaline and the mystical insights he gained. The Perennial Philosophy was Huxley's worthy attempt to tie all the great spiritual traditions into one. 3 pioneering giants of psychology had pointed towards the same direction. Richard Morris Buck had written Cosmic Consciousness, the first scientific study of what were usually called mystical experiences, before we later coined the term oneness experiences in 1975. William James, known as the father of American psychology, likewise identified mystical insights as being at the heart of the various world religions. Then Abraham Maslow, most famous for his hierarchy of needs theory, got very interested in peak experiences and self-actualization, writing The Farther Reaches of Human Nature. Maslow would probably have pushed his thinking even more if he hadn't suffered a fatal cardiac arrest at the relatively young age of 62. But, going back to the flower power era, it all started to go wrong. The understanding proved to be extremely limited, falling way short of the dream and what was necessary to make it become a reality. Communes had sprung up, yet quickly failed as emotional turmoil erupted. Their dream of togetherness was undone because weaknesses were ignored and thereby went unresolved. It got worse. It had become fashionable to travel to India, to experience the country's spiritual traditions firsthand. The gurus and holy men were mostly disappointing, with nothing of value to offer the Western visitors. India has an unfortunate culture of cheating, and the spiritual arena has always been easy pickings. A few of these con men were educated, and therefore quick to see an opportunity to be exploited as they realised that those with money also sought spiritual salvation, whether within India or coming from overseas. Cults developed, as lots of well-meaning seekers of truth were sucked in by all the spiritual mystery and hype. A few homegrown American gurus popped up, of course, adding to the messy stench, with one of the Indian cults moving their operation to the US for several years to take full advantage of the interest. Another fraud was based here in the UK, when not travelling internationally, having initially been groomed when still a child to be the next world teacher. He was less extreme than the other con men, although still talking the philosophical talk, but doing sod all in practical terms. And he never did a real day's work in his life. I'm deliberately not naming names. They had enough publicity. and they did enough harm. There was the problem of incomplete knowledge beforehand, not to mention institutional dogma, but these exploitative individuals, together with their gangs of men and women who joined in with the milking of the gullible, pulled everything down to an even lower level. These cults trashed the innocent longing of those searching for a higher reality. To any onlooker with critical thinking skills, it made the prospect of spiritual development as attractive as eating shit. Meanwhile, commercial materialism exploded in the 1980s and 90s, providing endless opportunities for distraction as a substitute for anything deeper. Let me be very clear. There is a huge wealth of undeveloped human potential waiting to be unlocked and unfolded. It's just that society has been sidetracked, with this subject of transcendence badly dragged through the gutter in recent decades. None of this should be surprising, because there's always been a struggle between two opposing or contradictory sides. There's a part of human behaviour which produces great qualities like love, kindness, curiosity and thoughtfulness, creativity and more. But the other side sucks. I'm talking about the ugliness of lashing out at others, invariably based on misunderstanding and a limited perception. All the bitching and moaning, cruelty and harm that comes gushing out in so many ways. This clash or polarisation is at the heart of what prompts the search for that something more, but also what gets in the way of finding a successful resolution. The world can and should be a much better place. It really could be heaven on earth, but belief won't get us anywhere close. As a child in the early 70s, I lived for a few years with my parents in a house shared with another couple. The aim was to take in the lost and lonely, drunks, addicts, to help them. But it quickly went wrong. The good intentions of my parents were naive, typical of the time, based on the hope of somehow making things better, but also on muddled or incomplete thinking. My mother gave up on the dream, and my father later ran off into the sunset with another woman, then another, but still tried to find a way forward through working in formal education, which of course remains a mess today. As an adult, I've had several oneness experiences myself. I've talked about these in another film and in an article. There'll be links in the description box below if you want to learn more. I know there's a deeper love and understanding. So, in explaining what's gone wrong in society with the searching for a greater truth or better way, I'm not being negative. It's just history, which has left a distasteful smell and stain. But now we have to move on, appreciating what was missing, what went badly wrong, as lessons to be learnt. There needs to be a more intelligent approach, a better informed one, with tangible goals and sharp focus. We must banish the fuzziness. Let's get down to a few basics and pop a few myths, clearing up some of the misunderstandings that seem to have been around forever. This searching is usually packaged as having an ultimate aim of achieving bliss or peacefulness. Yet this isn't what it's really about. It's not that that's untrue as such, but the emphasis is misleading, far too focused on what you can gain. Yes, there's an end to personal dilemma and suffering, peacefulness, if you will, even ecstasy. But at the heart of the matter is aliveness. There's a fullness of relationship with life, total engagement, with no avoidance whatsoever, no excuses or silly limitations. It's the full realisation of our human potential. It's much more than basking in the bliss, mere spiritual sunbathing. And with the current state of the world the way it is, if you've got anywhere near true fulfilment or realisation, you'll be far too busy giving, serving, to sit around in a lotus position being all peaceful and tranquil. There's an altered state of consciousness connected with oneness experiences in which you can get sidetracked into the indulgence of bliss. A oneness experience is a powerful, ecstatic glimpse of our incredible human potential. It's usually brief, lasting only a few timeless minutes. There's a phenomenal love for all and an understanding that almost defies explanation. I won't describe it more now because, as I've said, I've gone into detail elsewhere. But this mental state can sometimes be extended for a number of days or longer, as I once experienced, where you temporarily stay comfortably with this bliss. However, it misses the point, and you, the self, is still the problem, getting in the way of a true fullness. The connectedness and bliss is alluring, incredible, new, but it's nevertheless a subtle form of indulgence. Transcending the small self is easier said than done. When it's not right in your face, there's usually a remnant of this mother of all problems lurking somewhere, even when there's a oneness experience occurring. It's like pollution, a smell that won't easily go away, lingering on at all costs, refusing to budge even when displaced or watered down. Again, you need to refer to what I've said elsewhere on film and in that article. But the brain's hardwired neurological pathways come into this equation. There's no magic wand, no quick fix. Yes, there's neuroplasticity, but habits don't change overnight. You have to follow an exact process to gain a permanent fundamental shift. Not even a powerful oneness experience, or 2 or 3, is sufficient to bring this about. It takes a lot more effort, consistent hard work and detailed know-how. This nicely leads us to an opportunity to bust wide open another thing that's added to the blurring of understanding, contributing to the resulting shit. There's a danger that an egotistical man, and it's usually been a man, can have a oneness experience or a similar heightened insight, then be fooled into believing that they've become enlightened. And, of course, it's not the real thing. It's just a taster, a brief glimpse. But when misinterpreted by excessively egotistical individuals who've been obsessively searching for spiritual fulfillment, it becomes a cul-de-sac, a dead end. It produces an illusion of grandeur. So off they go, announcing their spiritual prowess, gathering a bunch of gullible believers like moths around a light. Only some of the moths get burnt, their wings damaged. If there was true light, daylight, the darkness would be gone, and it would be a matter of all fluttering about together, as in Jonathan Livingston Butterfly. The founder of our work, Ian, was an unassuming young man. Several months before he found himself immersed in the first oneness experience of many, something unusual had happened to him, prompting him to question all the norms. I won't say anything more, but he was primed for change, intentionally, and it worked. The first oneness experience happened during the summer of 1975. He was suddenly catapulted into a completely different way of seeing and feeling, without any prior knowledge of the subject. He'd never heard of such a powerful experience, nor of meditation, etc., and there were no psychedelic drugs involved. As it was subsiding, pulling on his understanding of the scientific method, Ian immediately asked himself a simple question. Am I going mad? Obviously, the answer was no. This was clearly a good thing, a revolutionary opening up of potential. Another oneness experience soon happened, then another and another and another. He used his capacity for logical reasoning to observe and analyse what was going on. Then, having moved to London to continue his further education, studying biology and psychology, he came across books written on the subject. He humbly looked through them, thinking he would find knowledge that he'd yet to understand. But even the best of these books were lacking in exact know-how, in comparison to the detail he'd already worked out. Yes, others acknowledged these so-called mystical experiences, which he simply termed oneness experiences, knowing nothing better. But there was a fuzziness in what they claimed to know. Meanwhile, the oneness experiences continued. He never even thought of initiating them. They just kept occurring, seemingly spontaneously. So Ian was building maps of 2 different states of consciousness or ways of being as he was profoundly changing. Again, using the simplest of terminology, he called the normal, ubiquitous psychological state selfishness, and the new alternative one non-selfishness. From the beginning, his no-nonsense approach was to demystify what was happening. It was too real, too important to do anything other than this. The humility and sense of service before self he was feeling, the deep and profound love for all, together with a grounding in the scientific method which he knew made sense, demanded nothing less. Eventually, in 1978, a final realisation resulted in Ian finding himself in a constant state of oneness. He regularly answered questions from several hundred people who were interested in learning how to shift themselves, doing so for many months. But he could see he was failing to properly communicate what he knew, with everyone filtering what they wanted to hear and didn't want to hear. Everyone said they were changing, knowing they were thinking more and feeling more. But he knew they were nevertheless missing the point. He walked away to take a different approach. Also, a few people were keen to exploit his commercial potential, but there was no chance he was going to become part of the spiritual circus. And so our work began, with a quiet determination to stick to what was real and pure. Ian couldn't exploit anyone for personal gain or play social games, the complete opposite to a cult leader. He could see everything that was happening around him, including the weaknesses and pitfalls, and he knew that what he had come to know was all just a matter of psychology and education. Our practical work with wildlife conservation therefore emerged, starting off in 1981 with the Oasis Nature Reserve and Education Centre in Sussex, England. We later then established the huge Comsberg Wilderness Nature Reserve in South Africa, 30,700 acres in size or 17 miles across. We also ran a medical clinic and other humanitarian projects in Sudan for 25 years, examining, diagnosing and treating up to 36,000 patients each year, after first responding to the 1984-1985 famine in Ethiopia with emergency relief aid. We've always done all this work on a non-paid basis, maximising project effectiveness and efficiency, having seen endless charity wastefulness. One of several blatant omissions that have been missed by those interested in spiritual or personal development is the need for an anti-hypocrisy test. And this is best plugged with actions speak louder than words. Ian realised very early on that people see change as an inner thing. It is, for sure, but it also has to be demonstrated, lived outwardly. There must be enhanced doing, not just more thinking and feeling. But people are often conveniently blind to their contradictions and hypocrisy. They only see what they want to see. This throws any possible delivery of change off course, fatally wounding the attempt at fundamental transformation. We go on a lot about what we call the danger of easy. It's more than laziness, more than complacency. It's taking the course of least resistance. It's a consequence of having low expectations, of keeping yourself safe, comfortably numb, of being risk adverse. Again, this is missed by others who claim to know. Another massive problem that frustrates genuine attempts to change, if left unchecked, is psychological avoidance. This is as big a hurdle as is ignorance of what to do in terms of following an exact process to enable change. It's nothing short of astonishing that avoidance has usually been avoided. Psychologists have known about avoidance for a long time, and they also seriously underestimate its negative effects on behaviour. Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, did a good job working out the various manifestations of avoidance way back when, even if he mistakenly believed they were fixed habits instead of learnt ones that could therefore be unlearnt. Avoidance is easy to understand. You negatively respond to disappointment, excessive anxiety and emotional pain, wanting to prevent or minimise the risk of it happening again. The resulting strategy of avoidance can involve making silly excuses, incorrectly blaming someone or something else, minimisation through trivialisation or intellectualisation, distraction, intentional forgetfulness or outright denial. It's a deceptively simple strategy that has short-term appeal, but it spectacularly backfires in the long run because you erect no-go barriers to keep yourself safe and then become stuck with them unless you put in effort to reverse it all, which rarely happens. These self-imposed limitations make you a lesser person as you hide in your shell or behind walls. Insecurity is a consequence as you pick the stagnation of safety over the alternative of a growth mindset. I won't go on explaining this further because we've already produced a series of 42 films that covers this matter and much more. For now, I hope you've got enough of an idea. So the avoidance syndrome plays a big part, feeding into the danger of easy. And materialism feeds into this, with most things geared up to making life easier for you, requiring less and less effort. Necessary qualities like struggle, perseverance and determination are overlooked, left underdeveloped. There's therefore a strong cultural tendency to play at changing, to cherry-pick and focus on those aspects which give you a good feeling about yourself. This makes you extremely vulnerable to exploitation, as unscrupulous individuals or groups can press your buttons if they have a bit of know-how. So you end up losing after all. The danger of easy, like avoidance, ultimately fails to deliver excellence or outstanding achievement. Another thing that's been invariably overlooked is the long history of failure. Good people have been sincerely trying to change themselves for the better for at least the past 3,500 years. And yet the problem of selfishness remains stubbornly entrenched, barely touched. When you point this out to those who've been attempting to change, they usually don't want to know. They find it too difficult to honestly admit that they've been getting nowhere. They prefer to fool themselves, believing otherwise. By contrast, our approach is an evidence-based one. We did a film on this topic of historical failure within the series of 42. The need for suitable role models is an important consideration that's also been completely missed, especially when you think about this in relation to the long history of failure and the difficulty of getting to grips with the so-called ineffables involved in heightened experiences. It's all about demonstrating that the idea or vision is definitely achievable, that others can clearly see it's attainable, that they too can do it. We've coined a term for this. We call it the Roger Bannister effect. Film number 32 in our Follow the Process series covers this topic in more detail. Having a oneness experience is undoubtedly profound, but it doesn't necessarily teach you anything other than showing you that there's much, much more. It's a glimpse of our human potential, nothing more, nothing less. My colleague Victoria, who made 2 brief appearances as a zombie in one of our films, had a oneness experience before getting involved with our work over 25 years ago. She's now my assistant director. But back then, regardless of her powerful insight, she was typically messed up as a person, despite having a degree and masters in psychology. Her profound brief awareness didn't, in itself, help that much. It was joining our work that gave her the necessary tools to move forwards. So, again, please don't think there's some magical quick fix solution, because there isn't. There's a process for change. Another aspect of all this, once again almost always conveniently overlooked, is the need for capability. I've already said that even attaining a state of bliss is merely a higher version of self-indulgence, albeit a euphoric one. So you can forget nicey-nicey concepts like spirituality. We need to get real and cut the bullshit. It's psychology. And greater capability must be the focus, eliminating limitations which arise because of avoidance. Or you can think of it as excellence if you prefer. There must be no hiding from reality. Service before self is nothing new. It's not some missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle that we've added. But it's often, nowadays, increasingly overlooked. Society appears to be growing ever more self-obsessed, although the self-orientated problem has always been the core sticking point. We've identified 16 key factors, the nuts and bolts or components of capability. And they're unspecific, meaning they can be applied to anything you choose to do, any dream you come up with. I've often said you could even become a better bank robber if that's what you decided on. And I always add that I'm not encouraging or endorsing criminal activity. The one key factor which would cause our bank robber to rethink his chosen profession, unless his name is Robin Hood, is service before self. This particular key factor changes the focus. It's no longer about you, which is crucial. The realisation of human potential is to be fully alive, using your developed capability for the benefit of all, in the service of others. It's more than self-actualization, it's self-transcendence. There's no more dilemma, no avoidance, no self-imposed limitations, no insecurity, no self-doubt, no arrogance. It's more than self-realization or awakening. It's rolling your sleeves up and getting your hands dirty, as in actions speak louder than words. Yes, there's a bit of creativity somewhere in the mix, but not anything anywhere near the arty-farty interpretation of the word. It's all geared up for service. With a changed perspective, you're still part of the whole. You haven't completely ceased to be. Far from it, because that would eliminate or diminish you as a tool for giving. But you're a speck in comparison to the inflated me-first self that you formerly identified with. This is true freedom, love for all, and there's full responsibility hand in hand with connectedness. I'm throwing a lot of deep stuff at you, one dollop after another. So hit the pause button if you need a break. Or, better still, rewatch this video again to pick up on the bits you'll almost certainly have missed this first time. Anyway, on we go, for just a little bit longer. Our aim in making this standalone film is to help correct or refocus the discussion. Whether you think of this as personal growth, spiritual development, or simply as the search for that something more. The overall context needs to be correct. Misinterpretations don't help. Bullshit definitely doesn't. You have to be willing to put yourself on the spot, on the hook. It's time to stop wriggling. Academics love their intellectualization, and one of their favourite tricks is to describe what might be going on, the characteristics or attributes of self-actualization or whatever. The fraudsters and chancers, the blind leading the blind, do likewise, mixing it up with platitudes and truisms. It makes them all sound clever. It gives them plenty to waffle on about. And I'm including the more modern life coaches within this exploitative rabble. They all ultimately miss the point, revealing major gaps in their understanding. By focusing their attention on irrelevancies, and thereby the attention of others, they're distracting their audience away from what really should be being addressed. In conjuring terminology, it's a deceptive sleight of hand. It's a card trick, perhaps entertaining, but nothing more. The essence, the heart of the matter, is missed. Our 16 key factors are mechanical. They're primary or causal considerations, meaning that everything else is secondary or descriptive. Even the best psychologists are still hung up on this describing tendency. But it boils down to beating about the bush, getting nowhere real. Instead, there must be an exact practical process that can be taught and learnt, which is what we know and deliver. We've clearly stated, for almost 50 years, that this whole endeavour of unlocking human potential, personal development, fundamental change, transformation, transcendence, is a straightforward matter of evolution. Previously, for millions of years, evolution has been a series of physical steps or gained advantages, genetic changes, based on the exploitation of a niche, involving survival of the fittest. But now, the next step forward in human evolution will be a conscious educational advancement. If we choose to make the leap ahead, it will be our individual and collective decision. Selfishness is an immature psychology. It has its good points, but it's basically dysfunctional and problematic. It produces adolescent behaviour. By contrast, non-selfishness is the mature psychology, adulthood. If we knew more about the universe, and we are steadily learning more, so keep tuned, we'd realise that we're not anywhere near as smart or far forward as many would like to believe. There'll be a lot of life out there amongst the stars, some of it as advanced civilizations, way ahead of us, in the Milky Way galaxy and throughout the billions of galaxies beyond. When viewed from a wider perspective, our current stage in evolution is probably best described as being semi-primitive or semi-civilized. So, putting this subject of human potential and the need for change in this context, we need to grow up. And if you want to know exactly how to do it, how to change your life and the world for the better. Then, as I've said a few times already, we've produced a series of 42 films as a comprehensive overview. The trailer for this Follow the Process series is about to appear at the end of this film, and there'll be a link for it in the description below. If I've really got through to you, consider joining our work. Get in touch. Whatever you do, be real.